delighted to have all of you here. Thank you for coming from all parts of the country. We're still gathering people from outside, but I'd like to get started because we have a wonderful evening, wonderful speakers, and I'm going to begin by inviting Chief Ava Hill to come up and bring us greetings and welcome us to her territory. I've known Ava Hill. We've been fighting these battles for, I'm going to figure, almost 30 years. I can't believe it. I hate to tell you that, Ava. Ava was elected chief of the 56th elected council of the Six Nations in Grand River 10 months ago today. After serving 3 terms as a councillor, Ava has extensive experience working with First Nations and Aboriginal organizations locally, regionally, and nationally. She served as the Executive Director of the Chiefs of Ontario Office, the Executive Assistant to a former National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, and the Executive Assistant to the Co-Chair of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples. She also spent time in Saskatchewan working for the Wahpeton Dakota Nation and the Prince Albert Grand Council. Please welcome Ava Hill, who will welcome us to her territory.
I'm going to put this down. Sego. That means hello in Mohawk. So, Sego. I'm so glad to be sharing the platform with Ben Powless, who's one of our young people from Six Nations. We're really proud of his achievements so far, and I'm looking forward to hearing him speak today. And when I was first invited to speak here for the Council of Canadians, and I saw Maude's name, I said, I remember her from, I can believe it was 30 years ago. And at that time, I was working at the Assembly of First Nations with George Erasmus, and we had a very good relationship with the Council of Canadians, and we did a lot of good work together. And just in talking to some people earlier this evening, I think it's time that we start to renew that relationship and come to work together on a number of issues. So I've been asked to come and welcome you to our territory and welcome to the traditional territory of our people, the Haudenosaunee. I'm so glad that you're here. Our community itself is located about 40 miles away. It's about a 45-minute drive. If you get the opportunity, I encourage you to come and visit us. I'm very proud of our community. As Maude said, I've been the chief for 10 months. I was on council for 9 years, but I was born and raised there. I went to school there, and then I ventured off, and then I went back, and eventually became the chief. I just want to talk a bit about our community. It is the largest populated First Nation in the country. We have 25,000 people, and there are 13,000, I think, that live in the community. They all can't live there because we don't have the land base that we need. We have 5 schools with almost 1,000 students. We have 2 arenas. We have a health center with a dialysis unit that is a satellite unit operated by St. Joe's Hospital. We have a nursing home. We have an Iroquois Lodge. We have a women's and men's shelter. And we have our own housing. And we have one business going that we generate a lot of revenue off for our community, which is the bingo hall. Well, not a lot of revenue, but more. And I also just have to mention that Six Nations is very sports-minded. We are Lacrosse Central. This year, we are lacrosse champions. We have, for those of you that are in the sports area, you will know that there are Junior A, Junior B teams. Both those teams won the Ontario Championship and the National Championships. We have Senior A and Senior B teams. Our Senior A people won National Championship, and our Senior Bs got silver. So we are champions, and we're very proud of all those guys. And we're having a huge community celebration coming up. We also have many of our younger people who look to the athletes as role models, and they strive to also go and achieve those cups. We have NHL players. We have a young man that was just drafted by the Anaheim Ducks this year, and we have another player, Stan Jonathan, who used to play with the Boston Bruins. We also are very big on arts and culture. Graham Greene, who was with Dances with Wolves and nominated for a Best Supporting Actor, is from our community. We have Derek Miller and Murray Porter, who are Juno Award winners. Derek is a multi-Juno Award winner. We have Sandy Smith, who has the Kahawi Dance Theater. And I'm telling you all this because we're going to be partnering with people in Hamilton next year. We're getting ready for the Pan Am Games. We have a memorandum of understanding with Pan Am 2015, and we're going to be hosting a lot of events here in Toronto and in community, so do come out and visit us, because we also have a Grand River Champion of Champions powwow that we hold every July. We also have our fall fair, and we have other tourism events. Well, the home of Pauline Johnson is there, Chiefswood Museum. And we also have the Mohawk Chapel and the Woodland Cultural Center. The Woodland Cultural Center is a museum, but if you visit there, you will see a residential school. We all know what the residential school has done, what that era has done to our people. It has created a lot of problems that our people are still dealing with these days. Our children were snatched away many years ago when they were young. They weren't loved. They lost parenting skills, and the effects of that has been passed on intergenerationally, so that we are still dealing with that. We are still trying to heal, and I'm very sad to say today that when I met Maude, the national chief I was working for was George Erasmus, who then became the chair of the Aboriginal Healing Foundation after the residential school apology was issued by Stephen Harper a few years back. Today, or yesterday, George was in Ottawa. I was just talking to him, closing the doors of the Aboriginal Healing Foundation because the federal government cut their funding off. Shame, shame. So, 16 years later, or not, we're not all healed. We still need that. Projects were started and cut off, and funding was cut off. So it was sad for us, and as I said, that's what George was doing in Ottawa. And I just wanted to talk a bit about the residential school, too, because we have decided to save that building. It's not a residential school anymore. It's falling down. It's in disrepair. But we've decided to save it. We've done a survey with our survivors, our residential school survivors, and they said that they want it there to remind people of what happened to our people. And their campaign is called Saving the Evidence, and they're on a big fundraising campaign now to start and repair that building so that people can come. The residential school era, or the residential schools, as I said, were imposed on us. Our kids were just taken. We weren't consulted on it. We had no say on it. The kids just went. And now what the federal government is doing to us is continuing to do that imposition. They impose legislation on us that we do not want. They do it without our free, prior, and informed consent, and they do it without consulting with us. And we have Section 35 of the Constitution of Canada, which says that Aboriginal rights are recognized in the Constitution of Canada. There are Supreme Court of Canada cases which says that if our rights are going to be developed, we are to be duly consulted and accommodated. There is a United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People which says that anything has to be done. They need our free, prior, and informed consent. Despite all this federal government continues to impose legislation on us without our free, prior, and informed consent. And I just want to talk a bit about two of those. I know I'm just supposed to be welcoming, but I can't pass up the opportunity. Whoever thought I would become such a politician, eh, Maude? But Bill, just two I want to mention because they have been in the news lately, and one is Bill C-33, which is called the First Nations Control of First Nations Education. Now, if it's truly First Nations control of First Nations education, I ask, why is it an act of the Government of Canada? It's because the minister is still maintaining control and maintaining jurisdiction. We have the inherent right to have jurisdiction over our own education. We know how to educate our kids. We know the importance of language and culture, yet he wants to still have that thumb over it and be able to control everything. They are doing their spin out there in mainstream Canada saying, listen, we've offered them all this money, $1.9 billion, and they're turning it down. There are 633 First Nations in this country. And if you divide that up between 1.9 billion among 633 First Nations, it's not enough to do anything in education. So that's one area that we're still fighting. The chiefs in Canada have rejected that legislation, and right now it's on hold. And we're trying to get the government to come to us and talk about education reform. Right now, the AFN is in the midst of an election, so I was just at a meeting last night with the AFN executive, and the push is on to try and get at least the federal government to come back to the table and start talking to us about education because, even though the money is not sufficient, we don't want to lose it. The other thing with respect to education is post-secondary education for our students. We have 400 kids that we have to turn away because we don't get enough funding to send our kids to post-secondary. These kids want to go out and get educated. They want to get jobs. They want to contribute to the global economy in this country, and they can't afford it because we don't have the money to do there. The other legislation I want to talk briefly about is Bill C-10, which is called, the government is calling a contraband tobacco bill. Tobacco has always been very important and sacred to us as Indigenous people. We've used it some time immemorial. We have also traded with each other, other First Nations, since we were first here in this land. This industry has created over 2,000 jobs in my community. And it has helped to boost the economy in Six Nations, but it's also helped to boost the economy here in Hamilton and Brantford and other surrounding communities, because our people come here and shop and spend their money. What will happen if this bill is passed is that this economy will be destroyed. People will be forced to go on social assistance, which in itself will create more social problems for our community. The government has said, oh, it's just about taxation. That's what we're telling them. They say, no, it isn't. But we know it is. If they're so concerned about contraband tobacco, then they should concentrate on where it is, which is in the big cities. They're concerned about organized crime, which is in the big cities. And if they're really concerned about the effects of tobacco, then why don't they lower the taxes on tobacco? So that's another issue. I was just making a presentation to the Senate committee on it last week, and unfortunately with this government, like they have done with a number of other legislations, it's our feeling that they may just ram it through because they have the numbers and because they can. So, we look to Council of Canadians to help get that word, and that's why I use every occasion when I am speaking to people like yourselves to tell you our side of the story and where we're coming from on these issues. We have many needs in our community. As I mentioned, we have education needs, we have post-secondary needs, health, diabetes and cancer are rampant in our community, such as they are in many other communities. We need housing, we need infrastructure. We have a new water treatment plant, but now we need piping so that everybody in the community can be connected to that water treatment plant so that we can have safe drinking water and potable water. Right now, people have to truck in to get it. But we also have many social issues, as I mentioned earlier, such as alcohol and drug abuse and bullying and suicides. And it's stuff that we need to deal with, services I have to provide, we have to provide to our community. And yet the government continues to cut back on the funding that they provide to us. And it's their fiduciary responsibility to provide to it. We could generate money through our land rights. We have a land rights claim up and down the Haldeman track, because initially we had 950,000 acres there. Now we're down to 45,000, but they won't come back to the table to talk to us about it. They said that, we don't know who to talk to because you're a divided community. Well, I think the House of Commons is pretty divided, isn't it? Our ancestors welcomed the first Europeans here, and we taught them how to survive on land that was taken from us, and we were put on reservations. The fact that the government does provide us with funding is an acknowledgement that they know they have the fiduciary responsibility to provide us funding and to accommodate us. It is not taxpayers' money. You hear that all the time, that it's taxpayers' money that is going to the First Nations. It isn't, because that funding rightfully belongs to us because we were never compensated for the land that was taken from us. They continue to cut back. They continue to cut back on the funding that they are supposed to give us. They won't come back to the table to talk to us about our land rights, and now they want to kill an economy in our community that is generating wealth. So I say to them, how are we supposed to provide services to our people? We don't rely on a tax base like the municipalities do because we have tax immunity. We were here first. We don't tax our people. So as I say, how are we supposed to provide services to our community? And that's the message I give wherever I can, because I'm looking for support wherever I can to get that message out and so that people can understand. We are starting to try and do projects to generate our own revenue. We are partners with the 5th largest company in the world, which is Samsung. Many know about Samsung. We are 10% owners in equity and wind solar projects with Samsung, which we just signed not too long ago. That is going to help us, and we are looking to further partnerships with other businesses and developments that want to do business with Six Nations. We want to create jobs for our people, and we want to create wealth for our community. Six Nations is open for business as long as it is respectful of our land rights. Before I want to wrap up here, I do need to mention that the murdered and missing Indigenous women issue. Tomorrow we will be taking part across the country in vigils for the Sisters and Spirits. I think it's been in the press and it's been coverage that we know that this government refuses to have a national inquiry into the murdered and missing Indigenous women. In fact, there have been instances where ministers have thrown papers on the floor and they've heckled. I think last week one of the MPs was heckled for wanting to push for an inquiry on this. We are looking at doing steps to do our own inquiry, but we need support of Council of Canadians and others to push this government to have an inquiry on the missing and murdered Indigenous women, because this is a terrible, terrible tragedy. And it's not not only a tragedy for in the cities, but even in our own communities. We have to all come together and work together. I was talking to Lois Frank earlier, and she's all gung-ho to get going on this, and we're going to see how we can come together and work and promote this. Because it is really, as I said, a tragedy, and it affects all of us. It affects every woman in this country, and I think that, we all have to step up and look to the men to support us and do something about this, the tragedy that is taking place. So I'm going to wrap up now. I want to thank you. I like coming to speak to these because I think it's so important that we educate each other, that we talk about who we are, what we are as Haudenosaunee people, and why sometimes we feel it necessary to block roads or protest. I know you guys like to protest. In fact, I think we've been on Parliament Hill together in the past, Maude. So I know we have much work to do. We have a big job ahead of us, and I know that with support of the groups like the Council for Canadians, that we can forge that solidarity, and maybe someday we can all get positive results for our community and for our people. Yawa.
Thank you very, very much, Ava, for your beautiful words and for your welcome to this territory. I have a few opening remarks. I'm MC tonight as opposed to being one of the speakers, but I do want to say a few things. One of them, I've had a thumbs up and a thumbs down. Thumbs down to Hunter Harrison, who is the CEO of CP, Canadian Pacific, who was quoted in the papers today saying that regulators have overreacted to the accident in Lac-Mégantic. I mean, 47 people died in a most horrific way. I would like to see him go to that community and repeat those words there. But a shout out and a thumbs up to the pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong, and I know they're a long way away. But these are some of the bravest young people on the planet, and we want our spirit and our energy to go to them. First of all, I'm just delighted to be in the beautiful city of Hamilton. This is the birthplace of in many ways, of unionism, of a rich history in working people struggling against betrayal, against very hard times, and coming together not only to survive, but to thrive through solidarity and community. The latest betrayal, of course, you know too well, and that is that U.S. Steel has declared that it's leaving. It dumped all its debt on its Canadian operations and then turned around and betrayed the promises they made, the funding that was given to them by different levels of government. The agreement with the Harper government never was in place to protect workers or pensions or wages, and shame on them for so shamelessly turning around and saying none of that matters anymore. Their behavior in Hamilton has been absolutely reprehensible. And the effects of pensions of workers on spin-off benefits and spin-off businesses, and even the tax base in Hamilton is going to be incredible. What's needed now is an urgent working group, a plan to put in action to include potentially workers reopening the plant. I mean, I don't know that that could work, but I certainly think it should be on the table. There are incidences in the United States where plants have been taken over by workers, but certainly the notion that we need to come together at the federal, provincial, municipal level with the unions and talk about the future of this city is absolutely urgent. But I have to warn us that that would fly right in the face of this comprehensive agreement with Europe, which is still in negotiation, no matter what the Harper government likes to tell you and how much they want to show you these photo ops. It's still very much under contention. I've just come back from Europe, and I can tell you there's a huge movement against not only CETA, but the agreement with the United States called TTIP. Huge, huge. Suddenly a real desire to work together, Europeans, Canadians, and Americans, and an understanding that this isn't Europe versus Canada. This is the European corporations and the North American corporations coming together to set up the lowest common denominators for everything: health and safety, workers' rights, environmental protection, austerity, and so on, right across the board. They don't want to bump into higher standards when they cross borders. or go across the ocean, and they want those standards to be the lowest possible. But what we're going to run into and what is needed in Hamilton and many other parts of this country is that you're not going to be allowed local economic development policies, local hiring content, buying locally, buying local food, schools and universities or hospitals that want to promote local food development. All of those will be able to be challenged by the big food service companies from Europe. And so we are coming together here in Hamilton this weekend, not only to show complete and total solidarity with the workers and others in the community in Hamilton that's been so devastated by this kind of behavior, but to lay it really very much at the feet of the Harper government. Not that they started it. I mean, a lot of these problems came with trade agreements and deregulation and privatization before them, but we have never had a government as right-wing, as vicious, as anti-democratic, as anti-people, as anti-dissent as we have in this government. And we cannot afford 4 more years of either Stephen Harper or Stephen Harper's ideology. So what we've come here this weekend to do, and it's been ongoing for the last year and is going to continue very intensively up until the election and beyond, is to forge solidarity, a network of solidarity with the unions and workers, social justice groups, environmentalists, youth, First Nations, seniors, environmentalists, artists, people from all walks of life who look at what this government's doing and say, you do not represent our values. You do not represent the values of most Canadians, including those who would have voted progressive conservative. You simply do not represent us. We are going to take back our country, and we're going to take back the values of dignity, inclusiveness, justice, and environmental stewardship that we know are the core of the values of Canadians. So we're going to hear from 4 wonderful speakers tonight. I want to first start by thanking 3 of our sponsors, most important sponsors, Canadian Union of Public Employees, Unifor, and the United Nurses of Alberta. And I also want to thank Kathy Clark and the chapter here in Hamilton for the fabulous work that you've done putting this event together. We owe you very much. So our first speaker is a very dear friend of mine. His name is Paul Moist, and Paul and I have spent a lot of time on planes and trains and automobiles and rooms like this talking to Canadians about public water, about health care, about CETA, about these values of dignity. Paul is, of course, the national president of the Canadian Union of Public Employees, which has 628 members. Paul is 1,000, I meant. I know that. I just wanted to be sure you were listening. It was a test. Paul is an ardent supporter of public services and has led CUPE to the forefront in the fight against privatization. He's championed the positive and vital roles of services like healthcare, education, and childcare that play in the making of our communities and make our communities better places for all Canadians. Paul is a firm believer in the labor movement as a force for social change, and I have to say, CUPE puts its money where its mouth is. CUPE has been a supporter and a friend and a partner in an incredible way as long as I can remember of our organization. And I know that Paul and CUPE really do deeply believe in the notion of this kind of solidarity. And he has used his leadership to expand CUPE's work in literacy, combating climate change, improving the socioeconomic conditions of Aboriginal peoples, anti-racism and LGBT rights advocacy, and as national president, Paul is a leading voice on the economy, globalization, trade, and a staunch defender of human rights in Canada and around the world. Most recently, he has focused on worker right and pension reforms. Please welcome Paul Moist.
Thank you very much, Maude. We lost a few members there, but we got them back. Maude, Chief Hill, ladies and gentlemen, sisters and brothers, it's a great privilege to be at the Council of Canadians AGM in the great city of of Hamilton, and I can't think of a better theme, forging solidarity. I think it captures our collective challenge and our collective responsibility as Canadians. And I want to begin by saluting each of you for your activism from whichever community you come from. It's incredibly important. There is an energy in our country, as I've traveled to every corner of Canada with Maude, that people of common purpose want better for our communities. And Maude, what can I say? We have traveled to every corner of the world, of Canada and the world. I'll speak about Hong Kong in a moment. As Maude said, promoting public water, our CETA tour. We're in the midst of a health accord tour, and we'll be in a couple of weeks on the West Coast. We're talking about 2015 and the yet-to-be-named Reclaim Our Democracy tour. And this summer, at Maude's request, and I'm like you, I can't say no to Maude Barlow. It was Maude who raised with the United Nations the tragedy going on in Detroit right now, one of the great American cities. And people having their water turned off, and their crime, they're delinquent in their bills. They're not delinquent in their bills. They're poor, and they have the highest water rates in North America, double the next rates anywhere else in the United States. And the ground is being tilled for the 700,000 remaining citizens in Detroit to completely privatize the system. But something happened in June. Maude Barlow raised this publicly in the United States and at the United Nations. Tremendous publicity, and we, in July, on a warm day in Windsor, loaded up some trucks with public water from Windsor, and we went over the Ambassador Bridge. We were somewhat harassed at the border, but not too much by our friends from U.S. Border Security. And then we went to this magical gathering of people in downtown Detroit, and they had gathered together to meet Maude Barlow, who had raised their issue in a way that no one in government had raised. Then we went to a church and dropped off water at a water station. For all the citizens who've had their water turned off, have to come and get their drinking water at a station. This is the kind of activism, this is just a little side thing in an agenda that's packed solid. 2 weeks ago, Maude and I in Washington, D.C., talking trade with American trade unionists, with members of Congress, with 3 senators who met with us. And I was thinking as I was driving here today about 2005, the WTO meetings in Hong Kong. We marched in Victoria Park, and today we must stand in solidarity with the citizens of Hong Kong in the streets. CUPE members love and respect Maude. She is a great Canadian, one I am proud to call my friend and my comrade. Together, we never let up in our shared goals to build a better world here in Canada and outside of Canada, where the people's interests are paramount, where respect for our planet and its resources drives public policy. All I can say on behalf of each and every CUPE member in every corner of Canada, thank you, Maude. We are proud to work with you and the army called the Council of Canadians. And CUPE shares the vision that Chief Hill talked about and that Maude speaks about building a better world. And this can only happen if we increase solidarity within and amongst all who share our goals for social justice. For CUPE, as a trade union, we know that social unionism is the key, that we must have a vision beyond the important job of representing workers every day, which we're proud to take on, but that can't be the answer. There must be a social unionism vision of our trade union work. And what is that vision? What are the components of that vision? Where the interests of the 99% trump the privilege of the 1%. Where public policy is driven by broad public interests as opposed to narrow corporate interests. 30 years of deregulation, privatization, and free trade have fueled an ever-powerful neoliberal agenda here in our country and around the world. Increasingly, water is a commodity driven by corporations and the 1%, not a human right. Basic shelter, sanitation, health services remain unavailable to more than half the planet. inequality is on the rise globally, including in this community and in our country. Funding the global military complex trumps funding needed global health responses, such as the current Ebola outbreak or the HIV/AIDS pandemic. And here in our country, the Harper government in 8 short years has either completely or substantially defunded the following civil society groups and organizations. Maude and I have worked on this list together. This will take a moment, and there's only a few words to each title. Think of the work performed by these groups, most of whom have closed their doors. The National Council of Welfare, the Law Commission of Canada, the Canadian Conference of the Arts, the Canadian Council on Learning, Canadian HIV/AIDS Network, the Health Council of Canada, Health Canada Library, Canada Without Poverty, the Military Complaints Commission, the Law Reform Commission of Canada, the Court Challenges Program, the National Association of Women and the Law, the National Network on Environments and Women's Health, the Canadian Research Institute for the Advancement of Women, the Status of Women of Canada, the Women's Legal Education and Action Fund, Match International, the Canadian Council for International Cooperation, Kairos, Development and Peace, Rights and Democracy, Alternatives, the National Aboriginal Health Organization, the Aboriginal Language Institute, the Native Women's Association, defunded, the Canadian Environmental Network, the Canadian Roundtable on the Environment and the Economy, closed, Climate Action Network, defunded, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. It is a decimation of equality and civility that we all seek. And Harper has made Canada less equal, less just, and much harsher for all citizens, especially Canadians who need comprehensive public services and advocacy, including seniors, youth, First Nations, women, the disabled, and new Canadians. 9 years of Harper has not just defunded those organizations and uncivilized our country. He's also eliminated the mandatory long-term census, dismantled the Canadian Wheat Board, assaulted our democracy through the Unfair Elections Act, making voting more difficult for groups that they don't believe vote for them. And it's only because of the work of the Council of Canadians that we got amendments to that horrific legislation. And I thank Maude for that. Imposing a new health accord which will strip $36 billion in healthcare funding out of our healthcare system over the next 10 years. $13 billion out of the Ontario healthcare system. By the end of 2024, Canada will fund 13 cents of every healthcare dollar. It was 50-50 when our parents' generation brought Medicare in. We'll be down to 13 cents on the dollar with the Harper vision for less government and an unfairer Canada. Closing at a cost savings of $2.5 million on a $248 billion budget, 8 Veterans Affairs Services offices in Canada, eliminating collective bargaining rights, allowing the total abuse of the temporary foreign worker program as a wage subsidy to McDonald's and KFC. If McDonald's and the service sector can't hire workers, they should pay those workers more, a living wage, everywhere in Canada. Ending Canada Post delivery door to door, the only OECD nation to do so. Laying off 30,000 federal employees and the services they provided to Canadians. Cutting EI, moving the old age security to 67 years of age, and to qualify for the guaranteed income supplement, the poorest of Canadians without pensions, to qualify for the GIS, you must qualify for the OAS. And that will move to 67 years of age over the next 11 years. Defunding the Assembly of First Nations and attacking on-reserve bans under the auspices of accountability. Ending the planned National Child Care Program. This is without doubt, as Maude has said, the most mean-spirited, neoliberal, harsh government in the history of our country. And 12 months from now, Canadians will vote, and we will vote to lay off Stephen Harper and reclaim Canada for Canadians. We need the strength and the vitality that the Council of Canadians brings to all debates, all chapters of the Council in every corner of Canada. And we need a trade union movement, a labor movement in Canada that gets it, one that embraces the work with all who want to build a better Canada. In the internet age, with 1,000 channels, with Facebook, with Twitter, an almost unlimited capacity to communicate, workers and citizens are arguably more isolated today than at any time in human history, are less informed, and are less conscious of their class and of the issues that confront us. We need to break the silence that threatens our activism and ultimately our democracy. We need more gatherings such as this, more collective displays of solidarity such as Maude led over the Ambassador Bridge into Detroit in July. But I remain optimistic when I see people rising up throughout the world, in Hong Kong, people questioning corporate power, people speaking truth to power and supporting acts of global solidarity. One has to have hope for a world that can get its priorities straight. When the Iron Curtain fell 25 years ago in 1989, a jailed dissident and playwright and a pro-democracy fighter said, "We live in the postmodern world where anything is possible but nothing is certain. We live in a world where anything is possible, but nothing is certain." How true. I remember 15 years ago in Ottawa at our first Blue Water Summit with Maude, working closely with CUPE and others, Maude introducing to a crowd one evening for the first time for me, Oscar Oliveira of Bolivia, a water warrior, who in a very short translated speech, maybe 5 or 6 minutes, spoke of his people's struggles, which saw the removal of the Bechtel Water Corporation from their community. I will never forget, this was a very short remarks translated in a hotel, about 300 of us in Ottawa. And this one sentence remains with me and always will. Oscar Oliveira said, "For us, democracy is who decides. For us, democracy is who decides." What powerful words for all citizens who share a social justice vision to build a better world. We can change the world if we vow not to be silenced, and if we vow to work together. We must work, I speak of CUPE and the trade union movement, must work with you. And we need your support to defend labor rights for unionized and non-unionized workers in Canada and throughout the world. We need to support a vision for decent work, pay, and pensions for all workers, and our trade union movement needs to embrace your vision of environmental stewardship, of democracy, of public water, of trade deals that don't place corporate rights trumping human rights around the world. So I commit CUPE and our 628,000 members to this vision, and I close by thanking Maude Barlow and all present from the Council Canadian and all chapter members who aren't here tonight, who are across Canada working in struggles in their community. You are making a difference in our country. Forging solidarity, the theme of tonight, is the only way forward. And if we embrace that theme and that solidarity message, we can't lose. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. I can tell you that I have colleagues in other countries who would give a great deal to have a powerful union leader or the leader of a very powerful union make the kind of statement you just made of solidarity with civil society. Thank you so, so much. Our next speaker is Ben Powless, a wonderful young leader and a very powerful up-and-coming voice in our country. Ben is a Mohawk citizen from Six Nations in Ontario, currently living in Ottawa. He has a degree in human rights, Indigenous and environmental studies from Carleton University in Ottawa. He has worked with the Indigenous Environmental Network and focused on climate justice and resource extraction in Indigenous territories, particularly in the tar sands, and most recently Ecology Ottawa as an organizer against the Energy East pipeline. Ben is an incredible ally on that struggle, and we're just about to launch a second round of the Energy East tour, this one through Atlantic Canada. Ben is also an organizer with the Defenders of the Land Network, Idle No More, and was a co-founder of the Canadian Youth Climate Coalition. I'm delighted to honor and welcome Ben Powless.
Beautiful. Okay. Sego. Sego. I just want to say nyawa. Thank you to the organizers, to everybody for having me here, to all of our co-presenters as well, for sharing this opportunity tonight with all of us. It's a particular honor to speak after the chief of my community, Chief Ava Hill as well. So I'm going to show a few slides tonight. I got here just about 10 minutes before it started. It was a very long day of travel. The slides are not in, I think, a great particular order, but they do speak to a lot of what I'll be speaking about. So I'll start with that. I want to start off talking a little bit about a prophecy I was reading about recently. This was told by another Haudenosaunee leader, a guy named John Mohawk, who passed away not too long ago. And he talks about how he was traveling at one point with a Hopi faith keeper. He brought him on tour to a bunch of universities across the United States and took him around the Niagara area and showed him, some of the hydro developments and everything like that. And this Hopi faith keeper, asked to pull over and take it all in for a second. And so he did, and he came back and he explained to John that, the Hopis had this prophecy that had been passed down, this prophecy of the spider woman, that eventually this spider woman would begin to crisscross Turtle Island, North America, with her webs, and eventually would begin to envelop all of, the land with her web. And this was basically, for them, a signal of the end times of civilization, of mankind as we know it. I think that, looking around our society today, we could make a similar case with a lot of the development projects that we're being asked to consider, particularly the pipelines that cover northern Alberta, that bring oil, meant to bring oil out of the ground, but also a new and very different expansion of other different extreme forms of energy. In many ways, Western civilization is still a recent creation, still very immature in many ways, still hasn't figured out how to not destroy everything it comes into contact with. But even then, I think Western civilization is interesting because it's begun to create a lot of its own prophecies about what will happen if we don't live within our limits, if we don't have respect and reverence for all creation, for each other. And the prophecies of Western science are no less dire. Unabated contamination of our atmosphere will eventually heat our planet, derail long-standing weather patterns under which our species have come into existence, will lead to catastrophic events that we now ridicule our ancestors for taking as warnings that the gods were angry, hurricanes and droughts, when our ancestors are perhaps more sentient than we'd want to admit. These are the things that could also lead to most of the species of this planet not existing by the end of our current century. I think we should take a little bit of solace from the words of another Haudenosaunee faith keeper, Oren Lyons, who reminds us that we don't need to save the earth, that the earth will continue to exist with or without us, but that we have no idea how we would survive without most of the planets and animals existing on this planet. And even if, just the simple species of bees go, that they may be enough to wipe out most of our civilization. So both Indigenous and Western prophecies tell us that we have to change a lot of the things that we're doing, or we may suffer this incredible risk. That work has already begun in a big way in Canada and the US with the resistance to the development of the tar sands, the largest single source of greenhouse gas emissions in Canada, on track to equal the emissions of about 140 countries, or about 1 billion people within the next decade, if they're allowed to expand. And that resistance in a lot of ways is being led by a lot of First Nations group in Northern Alberta, but in other cases, a lot of other struggles over extreme energy, including fracking, mining, logging, and the expansion of energy infrastructure, such as pipelines. There are a lot of challenges to that work, though, and one of the ones that I want to touch off is something that Ava sort of started to really get into, the state of colonialism that still exists today in Canada, and the state of racist and racist beliefs behind it. That quite simply, that we cannot explain how we got to where we are in Canada without understanding that Indigenous lives and communities are not valued equally. How else would we explain why Indigenous communities are allowed to become sacrifice zones for industry? Why else could we not explain that there isn't public outrage that people are getting sick and dying as a punishment for simply living in the same area as their ancestors and drinking the water and wild meats that their ancestors did? Or even more starkly, why isn't Canadian society outraged, completely outraged at the despicable numbers of missing and murdered Indigenous women? You can be guaranteed that if 1,000 wealthy women from downtown Toronto went missing over the last few decades, the Prime Minister would bring in the military. But in this case, the Canadian government has refused all intonations to support a public inquiry, suggesting that all the women missing and murdered are just individual crimes, unrelated, urging us not to commit sociology and understand them as part of a wider body of beliefs and actions towards Indigenous women, in particular, Indigenous women in particular, and Indigenous communities more generally, because that would lead to a lot of uncomfortable conclusions. But when you really start to understand this in the historical context, you see that Indigenous communities, and particularly Indigenous women's bodies, have always been the subject of state control, from residential schools to forced sterilization programs that have happened, to the forced relocation of Indigenous communities into marginal lands, to the police forces of the land ignoring many of the cases of these women because they were seen as unworthy, unloved, unneeded, not worth our time or consideration. But we have bad news for Stephen Harper, because this is an idea whose time has come and which won't go away. This is an idea that we won't let rest. This is an idea, quite frankly, that we aren't going to, back away from. We also know more broadly that when a lot of these communities actually decide to speak up, when they decide to stand up to the government, they're slapped down. We only have to look 1 year in the past at the community of Elsipogtog in New Brunswick, a community that was resisting one of the most extreme and risky forms of energy development on their land, hydraulic fracturing or fracking, that has been banned in many jurisdictions around the world after evidence showed that it leads to minor disruptions like aquifer contamination and earthquakes. We saw this community with very legitimate concerns about this kind of development, given no real place to voice them, and the community decided that they couldn't accept this level of risk to their drinking water, to future generations. And so they decided to occupy their own land to prevent the company from coming in, and they were treated like an occupying army. They were met by snipers, armed forces, tanks on behalf of the government. Many people were arrested, are still facing trial, in scenes that remind us how little has changed since the Oka crisis. It also reminds us that across this country, we, the collective people who live here, don't really understand each other. Because for one segment of the Canadian population, this was understood as an unruly group of rowdy Indians trying either to stop progress, demand money, or play around in army fatigues, who violated the supreme laws of the land and had to be brought to justice by any means necessary. And this was a common media framing, right? The other understanding possible, and one that I share, is that that there was a history of this land, in such a way that the history of that land is such that no government, no company can actually claim a legal right to the land. Understanding that this community has had a long history of oppression and top-down impositions. Understanding that community members were doing the only thing that they could possibly think of to try and stop this imminent threat. there was a lot of talk about reconciliation that goes on. And I think it's a very good thing that, we're starting to discuss the idea of reconciliation. But I think a lot of us are also understandably skeptical whenever the government or the courts say, hey, here's an idea that's going to solve all of our problems, because that's not generally gone very well for our communities. Because if this idea of reconciliation doesn't allow for us not to just collectively move people from that first understanding to the second, we won't prevent any similar incidents from happening in the future. Because reconciliation is really just another way of saying healing. But to paraphrase the healing walks that happen in northern Alberta, you can't start healing unless you've stopped harming. You can't stop healing until you've stopped the destruction. And healing can't be driven by the party responsible for inflicting the pain, as the government's hollow attempts at the residential school apology have laid bare. Many of our cultures have been wounded. Many of our languages are languishing. Many of our spirits have been broken. But still, our cultures have taught us resilience. Many of our people's ceremonies are all about enduring physical pain and discomfort, about finding relief in our beliefs of spirituality and in ourselves, about fundamental resilience. Our traditions teach us reverence for the land and for our mother, including our most sacred mother, Mother Earth. We have to do all that we can to protect, preserve, and empower those cultures and communities who are willing to stand up to protect Mother Earth and this new phase of hyper-destructive resource extraction as we bring online new technologies to scrape the bottom of the proverbial resource barrel. Speaking about the resistance, a lot of this work has started, as I mentioned, and the movements are beginning to collectively move together. And we've even begun to incorporate a lot of the Indigenous rights framework and environmental justice language into a lot of this work, which I think has been crucial to some of the successes achieved so far. About 5 years ago, organizers across North America made a concerted decision that in the lack of any government leadership around climate regulation, around tar sands development, around basically any environmentally sane trajectory, we would have to be a bit smarter to keep the tar sands in check, to keep our climate livable. And this was born, in this sort of framework was born the idea that we had to plug the pipelines to stop the critical expansion of oil infrastructure out of Alberta to make sure that the tar sands could not expand as the government's intended. And this set the stage for two fights that we're still fighting. TransCanada's Keystone XL pipeline, which you're seeing a number of photos from the fight in the US, and the Northern Gateway pipeline in British Columbia. Now, 6 years ago, if you had asked most of us if you thought that people power could stop a piece of energy infrastructure that was almost as unchallenged as a hydro pole, I think a lot of us would have been skeptical. But here we are, after 5 years of incredible campaigning, incredible work in both places, incredible leadership by communities in both places that have built alliances between Indigenous and non-Indigenous groups that have organized, in the US alone, thousands of people getting arrested in front of the White House as part of staged sit-ins and direct action there, where we've seen there has actually been over 2 million people make submissions to the US government in opposition to the Keystone XL pipeline, I think the most contentious issue that people have ever sort of raised. And what's that done is it's actually created 5 years of indefinite delays of the Keystone XL pipeline. And there's a lot of reports that this could be squashed before the end of Obama's term by Obama himself, who has recently said that he will be considering the overall climate implications of the pipeline, which would be enough to stop not just this pipeline, but an additional 5.1 billion tons of greenhouse gas projects that were slated for the US. So in British Columbia, we see an entire province that has come together to reject this other pipeline, the Northern Gateway pipeline. Over 100 First Nations have banded together to sign on to declarations declaring the pipeline illegal in their territory. Others have set up permanent encampment blockades on their traditional territories before construction has even begun. We've seen it become such a political hot potato that every other party has rejected the pipeline, and even the normal pipeline cheerleaders in the Conservative Party, who eventually approved the pipeline, did so by quietly issuing a press release on a Friday afternoon in a quiet nod that they didn't even want to be attached to this decision. With the US and BC opposed to tar sands pipelines, oil companies, I think, wondered how they could unite the rest of the country. And lo and behold, TransCanada decided to put an application for a 4,500 kilometer pipeline from the tar sands in Alberta all the way snaking through most of the major cities in the country, all the way to supertanker ports in Kakuna, home of endangered beluga spawning grounds, and St. John, New Brunswick, home of the highest tidal waters in the world. So I think I'll have to actually, thank TransCanada for their assistance in for fomenting national resistance. And what's actually interesting is that these strategies are starting to work. So this year alone, there were, I don't think a lot of us have actually heard about this unless you read, the back of the business section. But this year, 3 actual tar sands drilling operations were actually abandoned in Alberta because of what the industry euphemistically refers to as transportation constraints and infrastructure challenges. That's all of us, by the way. And in stopping just those 3 projects, we've stopped 2.7 billion tons of greenhouse gases from going into the atmosphere and cost the industry $12 billion, which I think if you open up the program, there's a blurb in there from Council of Canadians about how they decided not to put money into offsets, but to invest in local infrastructure. I think it's a damn good return on our investment to donate to these groups that are fighting over the oil industry. Now, these are very powerful companies, right? A lot of their power comes from their incredible amounts of money, billions and billions of dollars in store. And that money isn't just evaporating from our work directly combating them and stopping them, but it's also under direct assault from divestment groups here in the United States and Canada. In the US, there's already a very substantial divestment movement on the ground, and it's gaining steady momentum here in Canada as well, to the point where recently the World Council of Churches, as well as the Rockefeller Foundation, which is money from the heirs of Standard Oil's fortunes, have both agreed to start divesting from tar sands and put money into renewable energy and green jobs. We're even seeing socialist institutions like the World Bank and the International Energy Agency begin to understand the stakes and put out reports that suggest that as we see climate changing, governments will begin to legislate internationally, nationally, even locally against greenhouse gas emissions, and that investments in fossil fuels will begin to lose their values. The International Energy Agency alone suggests that 60% of fossil fuel reserves that exist may be unburnable, may never ever leave the ground. And they suggest even higher numbers for tar sands, which are much more carbon intensive, somewhere in the order of 75%, meaning most of the perceived value of oil companies may evaporate overnight as investors reevaluate their stocks, and which can rapidly change the stakes and power of these institutions as more and more analysts and forecasters begin to take their money out of these, failing institutions. The other sort of piece there is that there's a lot of ongoing litigation that has the potential to change things fairly dramatically across the country. One of the most interesting court challenges recently has been led by the Beaver Lake Cree Nation, who are suing oil companies and the government alike for human rights violations stemming from the ongoing decimation of their traditional territories. This court challenge, the government tried to get thrown out over the past few years. That's why there hasn't been very little progress. But within the past year, the actual court decided that, no, this was a legitimate concern that if this challenge is successful, could establish a precedent for communities being able to stop any of these projects on the grounds of seeing them as human rights violations and getting compensation for that. Immediately after the federal government gave the green light to Northern Gateway, they were served by 8 injunctions launched by a number of different environmental and First Nations groups who argued that they weren't properly consulted or accommodated by the government, where even a former federal minister noted that any one of these lawsuits could push the project back at least a number of years, perhaps indefinitely, and ultimately could kill it. But I think one of the most interesting things that has happened in Canadian law recently was the Chilcotin decision, which flipped the entire script on the balance of power in these resource decisions and gave that back to Aboriginal communities by cementing Aboriginal title as the underlying reality of our country. Now, yeah. There were still some problems, of course, with the court's decisions, as there always are. the court still said the government could push a project through if it was absolutely necessary to safeguard the lives of, every Canadian on the planet. But otherwise established that there would be a new benchmark for gaining consent from Indigenous communities, far and above the current minimum of consultation and accommodation. It was very telling that this was a unanimous decision, showing that Aboriginal title is here to stay and recognized in courts, superseding government and corporate claims to our people's lands. And personally, I like to imagine that, the day that Stephen Harper was told this, the results of the decision, there was a single tear that came down his cheek. The fourth piece of this puzzle is that there's been a lot of work to build up incredible amounts of mass opposition, bringing together diverse movements, nowhere better represented than at the recent People Social Forum in Ottawa, which brought together 5,000 activists, unionists, Indigenous groups, and others from across the country in the largest gathering in this country's history. Or just last week at the People's Climate March in New York City, which saw over 400,000 people participate in the largest environmental rally, I think, in the planet's history. I think the government, yeah, let's celebrate that. Yeah. Some of you have organized protests, I'm sure, before, and sometimes it's good to get 100, 200 people out. 400,000 is a big march, is a big rally to organize. I think our government is seriously scared of a lot of these developments, that these diverse groups are beginning to unite, to come together in larger and larger numbers, particularly First Nations starting to stand up. They were scared enough of Chief Theresa Spence fasting across from Parliament Hill to go and try and discredit her by announcing, oh my God, she drives an SUV, which to anybody who's ever been in Northern Ontario communities that have ice roads and are not paved was not a big surprise. They were scared enough of Cindy Blackstock, who spends her time campaigning to get equal education funding for First Nations, to send government agents across the country to attend her talks and spy on her and report back. They were so scared of a group of Native youth that called themselves I Don't Know More, who decided that they were going to take up arms, figuratively, against the omnibus bills that they had tried to pass that would take away the rights of all Canadians to have their say in democratic processes, that they started monitoring all of their round dances in malls and intersections. Not so much, I think, because they thought that a round dance in the Eaton Centre would lead to, riots on the streets everywhere. But I think because it showed that, not just Native youth were starting to pay attention, but also that non-Natives and the media were paying attention as well to what was going on in Native communities, and were even generating a lot of support. And even on another personal side note, Dylan here from the Council of Canadians recently shared with me one of those actual declassified documents that the government had written up about all of the monitoring that they were doing of all these sort of protests and blockades and events. 30 pages in total, a few hundred listings of mostly banal sort of things like First Nations blockade, Six Nations, or Environmental Rally Vancouver, with two exceptions. One of Theresa Spence, and the other entry for Ben Powless, Mohawk Environmental Rally in Toronto in 2011, which was a little bit creepy to see, a little bit of an honor to see that the government also put my name there, but also just bad intelligence. I wasn't even at this supposed rally that was in my name. So whoever here is from CSIS or RCMP should take note of that. And I've asked my friends in Toronto if they ever do organize a Ben Powless rally, I'd be happy to come down and speak. But it's really telling. The government is so scared of this united and unifying opposition that's being built up that they're sending the RCMP, they're sending CSIS, they're sending the government's own, Prime Minister's own office appointees to monitor these protests, to take a look and make sure that, they have their fingers on everything that's going on across this country. And that's why we need to do exactly more of that. Yeah. Now, at the same time, I've heard from a lot of Native groups out in British Columbia who have spent the last few years fighting Northern Gateway. Now there are other proposals for other pipelines through their territories, Kinder Morgan, Trans-Pacific Trails, a whole host of other pipelines, that they don't want their children in 20 years from now to have to be spending their time fighting the same pipeline battles, playing whack-a-mole with these pipeline corporations. I think that, what we're starting to see is that, we need to have a more concerted strategy to react, not just to these pipelines, but to, I think what our brother Paul Moyse brought up was an entire incursion against, democracy, freedom, and justice in this country. So I think we all agree that we need to, defeat Stephen Harper. I like what you said, lay him off. We can agree on that, but I think it's what comes after that, and that in many ways is more important. I think we need to ask ourselves if we can commit to supporting, empowering, and extending solidarity to the First Nations and other marginalized communities who are leading many of these struggles. Can we learn to listen and follow those communities who are already demonstrating leadership? Can we find alternatives for those communities that have been held hostage economically, even communities that are suffering from economic Stockholm syndrome because of the stranglehold that industry has on them? In particular, can we think of our just transition for not just of our workers, but for Indigenous communities who may be fully dependent at this time on these extractive industries? Can we commit to starting to implement solutions now, not just thinking of them as something way off in the future? We have a lot of, the technologies to generate electricity or heat or other, manufacturing processes a lot better. But we can do a lot more towards reducing and making more efficient our current energy use as well. But I think the fundamental question is, can we commit to building up the power of communities beyond the ballot box? Because most of these issues aren't even fully in the control of our government. A lot of them are controlled by us. A lot of them will be resolved in the streets, in the classrooms, in our workplaces, in our communities. In short, can we commit to not just regime change, but system change? I think a great deal hinges on how we answer these questions, and I hope we're ready to not unequivocally say yes. Nyawagoa, thank you.
Wow. Megwich, Ben, very much thank you. Just a couple of remarks in response to your wonderful words. I think it's really important for us to say how strongly we acknowledge First Nations leadership. And in all my years of activism, I haven't seen as close a relationship between progressive civil society, working people, First Nations people. And I think if there's anything to thank Stephen Harper for, perhaps it's that. I know, for instance, just a number of the struggles that you just mentioned, the Elsipogtog, the Chilcotin struggles, the Council of Canadians local chapters have been on the street, on the front line, on the protests, not in front, just in solidarity. And it's something that has made us very proud. I do want to say, when you talked about the pipelines and the stopping of the exports, that I don't know if people know, but the first export of unprocessed diluted bitumen has been shipped to Europe. The first shipment arrived in Spain last week, and the second shipment is on its way to Italy. So when I wrote a paper called Liquid Pipelines, the threat of extreme energy to the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence River a few months ago, I was predicting this would happen. I had no idea it could happen so quickly. So we are in a race against time, and certainly, of course, Stephen Harper wants for Canada to replace Russia as the main energy source for Europe. And that's what a lot of this behind this CETA talk is. And just lastly, I want to say that I love the scenes of people getting arrested at the White House. I was with my lawyer husband in front of the White House, who wouldn't let me get arrested, kept doing this to me. So rather, I got arrested back here in Ottawa 2 years ago, just this past couple of weeks, when we held a protest, and people knew if they crossed a divide, they would get arrested. And I was among the very first to cross this divide. And a very big RCMP guy said to me, "Okay, would you please go back over that barrier?" And I said, "I'm really sorry, I can't." And he said, "I'm going to ask you a second time, please go over that barrier." And I said, "I really can't." He said, "The third time, he said, I really mean it. I'd like you to go across there." And I was like, "What is this?" And he said to me, "Ms. Barlow, if I go home tonight and have to tell my wife I arrested Maude Barlow, I'm going to be in trouble. I said, would you like me to give you a note? He said, you know, I have to put handcuffs on you. I said, I know, let's just do this thing, right? So it was a moment. All right, we have another wonderful speaker whose name is John Cartwright, a very good and dear friend of the council. He's a member of our board of directors. John is the president of the Toronto and York Region Labour Council, representing 195,000, not 100, union members in Canada's largest urban centre. A carpenter by trade, he was formerly the business manager of the Building Trades Council and co-chair of the Metro Job Start Coalition. John has served on the boards of the Waterfront Regeneration Trust, the United Way, Toronto, the Labour Education Centre, and over the years he has helped develop the Campaign for Public Education, Public Transit for the Public Good, and the Toronto Water Watch campaign to defend vital public services in Toronto. John has been deeply involved in apprenticeship and training issues, as well as crafting the Green Job Strategy for the Canadian Labour Congress. In 2007, he led a successful fight for a $10 minimum wage and has recently focused on challenging the growth of poverty wages in our economy. Please welcome our good friend, John Cartwright.
Well, good evening, sisters and brothers. Thank you, Chief Hill, for welcoming us to your land. And you mentioned La Crosse Central, and that, of course, took my mind back to when my young guy decided he wanted to learn how to play lacrosse. He's 6'2" now, but back then he was 8 years old and about 60 pounds soaking wet. And he started going to learning the sessions in lacrosse, and then I took him to a professional game, Toronto Rock, and he noticed that every player had a nickname. So the next time he went to the training session, he came back, he had a smile from ear to ear. And I said, why are you so happy? He says, the coach gave me a name. I said, what's that? The Crusher. I want to pick up on a couple of themes that have been shared with us tonight. I was in New York City 2 weeks ago with that 400,000 women and men that marched through the streets for hours and hours and hours. And many of our own Council of Canadians activists were there as well, and shout out to all of them that took buses down to New York. It was amazing output of humanity to say that we want this world saved. And we're challenging those political leaders who are not doing what they need to do to save this planet. There was a union contingent after First Nations and Indigenous peoples. And what was fascinating about the speeches that were made by union leaders, the first one up was the president of the New York Nurses Association. And she had hundreds of her members there that day and said, for us, climate change is not an abstract concept. I was an emergency room nurse in the hospital when the victims of Hurricane Sandy started flooding into my hospital. My sister nurses were in hospitals that were being shut down because the flooding destroyed their electrical and mechanical systems. The healthcare local SCIU and others found the same things. And whether it was transit workers who'd been there, the subway shut down, or building janitors whose workplaces being shut down because of Hurricane Sandy, suddenly the issue of climate change was very real. And those courageous union leaders who had always wanted to do the right thing had immense support of their members to take on this issue, and there were thousands of union members marching in the streets that day. The day before, there was a meeting of global trade union leaders who wanted to become much more serious about talking about power. Power. And we were lucky we had Naomi Klein come and speak with us at lunch. And her latest book talks very much about the extremes that we're facing. And her slogan now is, the problem is not really carbon, the problem is capitalism. The immense, obscene power of oil corporations, big coal in the US and elsewhere, and their political politicians that have been bought and paid for, in essentially sabotaging all of the work that humankind said needed to be done through Kyoto, going to Copenhagen and sabotaging the next stage of tackling this issue. And those union leaders were an amazing group. Some of them were the New York leaders that I just talked about. Some were oil workers from Trinidad, oil workers from Brazil, gas workers from the UK and from Canada, saying, yeah, our members work in this carbon economy, but we got to figure out a transition. We got to figure out how we make a different kind of world, but workers still have rights and still have dignity, and their communities still can thrive and not be left behind. Well, as capitalism is doing with Hamilton, with U.S. Steel, having bought out Stelco and declaring war on those workers from day one, putting them on the picket line through lockouts and strikes, attacking the pensions, attacking the benefits of those workers, and now attacking the very jobs that this community was so known for so many years. Now, I don't want to talk about the bad stuff. I want to talk about some good stuff. I'm a carpenter by trade, as you heard. And I've always believed that construction workers, and there's a lot of us in this country, we have some choices. We've got amazing skills. We can build anything that y'all ask us to build. But I believe we have a choice to advocate for building good things that work in harmony with Mother Earth, that build sustainable economies, that have a footprint that's much lighter on our environment. And we've, for a number of years now, since 1999, Canada was the first central labor body in the world that adopted a green jobs strategy back in 1999. I helped write that strategy, and at the Canadian Labour Congress Convention, it was very interesting because the loggers from BC were locked in a tough fight with the environmentalists, and they wanted to vote that down. But we were able to sit down with our sisters and brothers, and mostly brothers in that industry, and talk about what sustainable forestry would really look like. And I was able to draw on some of their own history that some of the young guys didn't know about. In 1949, the head of the loggers in Ontario wrote a book called Green Gold, How the Forests Can Serve Our Communities for Generations to Come. And I said, if that's the legacy of your union, let's live up to that legacy, and let's together craft a plan that ensures that you have a voice in shaping that sustainability, that you have a voice in making sure it's not just corporations cutting and running, but that your kids and grandkids can still live in those communities that you're in. And they decided they would not oppose the position paper. They abstained, but we passed it unanimously. Steel workers and auto workers, construction workers and oil workers passed that position unanimously in 1999. We were ahead. And I think there was a lot of enthusiasm after Kyoto as we saw those opportunities in moving our economy from the dirty old brown economy to a green economy with some future in it. But we did see some setbacks. You know, Big Oil decided they were going to spend literally billions of dollars on TV ads, on politicians, on lobbyists, changing the political outcome of elections in provinces and in states in the U.S. and in senates, and doing everything they could to do climate change denial as an industry, a very powerful industry in North America indeed. And so we've had some setbacks, but I'm still optimistic that we can do the right thing. Because in spite of the concern of what the WTO has done to the Green Energy Act in Ontario, stripping away our right to demand that those jobs of manufacturing are located in this province, last year, over 1,500 construction workers, union members, were employed installing solar panels across this province. That's 1,500 people that may have not had a job. And guess what? Many of them were young, racialized kids who were getting their first job as an apprenticeship, and First Nations kids up north who were getting their first job as an apprenticeship in the trade that they were going to have for the rest of their lifetime. And that's not a bad thing to say to the next generation. We can give you a job doing the right thing that's going to provide clean energy for us in the future. You know, the big causes of energy, or the big users of energy, is obviously creation of energy, as we know that in the tar sands, transportation, buildings that we're in, whether it's your home or your office or a plant that you're working in, and manufacturing processes themselves are tremendously energy users. But we've been able to tackle much of that. we've been able to look at alternative energy that I just described, and in wind and in geothermal. We've been able to look at fuel-efficient vehicles, at cogeneration in buildings, so that buildings like this, instead of drawing energy, can actually contribute energy back into the grid. And we've been able to do energy retrofits in manufacturing processes. In Red Pass Sugar in my city, they were able to retrofit the sugar refinery, and they used 40% less water than they did 4 years ago. That's a tremendous saving, not just in water, but also in electricity use. And so there's tremendous opportunity to take what we do today on a day-to-day basis and turn that around, put a green lens on it, and say we can do things differently. And we can create thousands and thousands of jobs in the process. But we were up against some very powerful forces. And I know Paul said we should lay off Stephen Harper. I actually think the phrase should be, "You're fired for cause." And here's how we get to that just cause firing. I'm asked to speak to a lot of organizations and conferences over the last number of years, and I say there's three things that any of us need in order to win as an organization. The first thing we need is a strategic plan. A plan that takes into account the forces that are up against us and the forces that are on our side. That looks at how you take the resources, both the human resources and the financial resources you have, and you apply them relentlessly, constantly, thoughtfully to the problem at hand. The second thing is you need to engage your members. Because we don't have the billions of dollars that our opponents have, but we have people power. We have people power. In the union movement, in the Council of Canadians, and NGO, civil society, and First Nations, we have the power of people. That used to be a very powerful slogan back in the 60s for some of us that remember. All power to the people, was about engaging members. And I'll be honest with you, some of our unions have not done that as well as we needed to. Tim Hudak taught us a lesson. When he was coming into Ontario and threatening to bring up US-style legislation that would decimate the power of our unions, we were forced to go and have a different kind of conversation with our members than we had in the past. And we had to talk about the role of unions both in the workplace and in society. And that was a very fruitful conversation. And I think that as we continue to build the power of the Council of Canadians, as we continue to think about reaching out to the next generation, engaging our members, engaging civil society, engaging Canadians, is the vital piece of how we make that strategic plan work. And the last piece of the three pieces is an alliance policy. A policy of alliances. Because no one organization can win by itself, not in this globalized world, not with multinational corporations that are more powerful than many countries and states in this world. But the alliances that I've seen since I've come on the board of the Council of Canadians, forged particularly with the First Nations and Indigenous peoples, with people working in small towns, in outports, in villages, and in big cities, seized with the concept that we can build a better Canada. Those alliances have been tremendously powerful, tremendously inspiring, and it's what makes me believe that if our good friends say to us, when you make a decision, today you should be thinking how it impacts 7 generations from now, that we're making proud the people that come 7 generations from now, because we're doing the right thing together. Sisters and brothers, we can build a better Canada. Thanks very much.
I mean, that awesome power. I'm just so moved and delighted with the power of these speeches and the commitment that you're hearing tonight. Thank you so much, John. Thank you so much for being on our board and for your leadership. Our last speaker tonight is a very, very good friend who has come to several of our events. He came to the G20 in Toronto 4 years ago, 4 years ago. We spoke to 3,000 people. They were scalping tickets outside. It was an absolutely wonderful evening. John came again to our AGM in Nanaimo 2 years ago. We keep in very close touch because we're fighting these trade agreements across the pond. John Hilary is executive director of an organization called War on Want. He lives in the United Kingdom. He has worked in the global justice movement for the past 25 years and has published widely on issues of globalization, trade policy, and worker rights. He was one of the first external columnists to be invited to contribute to The Guardian's Comment is Free website when it was launched in 2006. I think you have a lot of Guardian fans in this room. And John, yes, and John has written regularly for this and many other publications since. His report on the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, that's TTIP. Now, this is the big agreement that is now being negotiated between Europe and the United States, which has suddenly made many European allies conscious of CETA. In a way, we're almost grateful TTIP has come along because we were going, yoo-hoo over here. And Europeans were saying, oh, you're just Canada, and you're also friendly, and you don't have any big bad corporations. I guess they haven't heard about our mining companies. We have a story to tell there. But so John's written a report on TTIP, published by the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation in February of 2014. It's been translated into 5 European languages. I think more than that now, more than that. In 2013, John was appointed honorary professor in the School of Politics and International Relations at the University of Nottingham. His new book is called The Poverty of Capitalism, Economic Meltdown and the Struggle for What Comes Next. It was published by Pluto Press, and it is available out here, and you're not going to have John to sign it if you don't get him to sign it tonight or this weekend. Please welcome our good friend, John Hilary.
Thank you so much, Maude, and really it's an absolute privilege to be here. I'd like to start again by thanking Chief Ava Hill for the very warm welcome on behalf of Six Nations. I hope that when you next come back to England with your daughter or without your daughter, you'll come and visit us in turn. You'll be very welcome there. Also a huge thank you to the Council of Canadians. It's a real privilege to be here, as I say, and Maude's referred to the other times I've come over to this side of the Atlantic and been part of your incredible movement-building meetings. And it really is so amazing to me because I go back every single time, not just inspired, not fired up with a real sense of purpose, but also having learnt so much from all the strategies and all of the things that you've put in place. And I know that the next couple of days I'm going to go back with exactly the same spirit of learning and really taking from the things that you always bring together. The spirit of the Council of Canadians is something which we really, really, really want to reproduce on the UK side of the Atlantic. And I'm really, really grateful for you to having me here. For those of you who don't know, War on Want, the organization which I'm currently the director of, it's been around for a bit. I mean, since 1951 it was founded, and it came out of the labor movement. So again, I'm very proud to be able to share the platform with representatives, leaders of the labor movement here in Canada. And we share a lot of the principles, the philosophy of the Council of Canadians. The idea that we're fighting power, and that the issue at the heart of everything we do is about power. There are lots of organizations, charities, aid agencies in Britain which deal with the symptoms. And, you know, we've got a lot of those symptoms. For the first time ever, we've got food banks in Britain where people are going to food banks. We've never had those before. And some of the charities will be saying, well, we need to set up more food banks and start giving out more money to the people who need the money and start giving out food to the people who need the food. Well, surely we've got past that. Surely the time now is to ask the question, why, in the affluent, the rich societies that we live in, should we be contemplating the idea of giving people out food because they have none at home? How is it that we should be just going back to the old Victorian ideas of charity, philanthropy, aid, rather than talking about social justice and challenging power head on? And that's the thing which we share with the Council of Canadians. And the other bit which really makes me so happy to be here on the sort of international wing of the forging solidarity, forging international solidarity, is that idea that it's politics as well. For us, all poverty is political. It's brought about by politics. It's brought about by the political decisions of the elites. They can be government elites or they can be corporate elites. But, and this is the really positive, powerful part which I want to try and address a little bit in what I have to say, those decisions are challenged by political action from the base. Organized political action, organized in the trade unions, organized in the other environmental movements, in all of the social movements that we partner with in our country and around the world. It's political action which brings change, and that's what also brings hope. And that politics, I think, we share again with the Council of Canadians. Not a partisan politics, although we do know certain groups who we find it difficult to be partisan with, but a politics of change which comes from below and challenges all political parties to do the right thing. And in a way, it's nice to be in Canada as a British person, because there are a lot of things that we have in common. I'm not just talking about the fact that your $20 bill seems to have a face on it, which I recognize from some of our money as well. Although she doesn't look the same on British money as she does on your money. We need to do something about that. And I'm not even talking about the weather, although I really would like to say, when I arrived in Hamilton last night, and there was this fine drizzle and a little bit of a cold spell in the air, I just thought, that's nice. It felt very comforting. I don't know why. It's something very deep inside us. But the real thing which I suppose unites us at the present moment is that we're all struggling in our different ways against conservative governments, which we didn't want there to be in the first place, and we don't want to be there for very long. And we both, in Britain and in Canada, have the opportunity to throw them out next year, because we've got a general election as well. If they bring your one forward, as I hear people are suggesting they might do from its October fixed point, if it comes forward to May the 7th, you can have it on exactly the same day as ours. And that would be quite a nice double whammy to get rid of them. And the programs of the Conservative governments on both sides of the Atlantic are not by any coincidence the same. We know that they have been taking lessons from each other. We know that we've sent government officials over here to learn from the Harper government, and that Canadian government officials have also traveled over to Britain. And it's this downward spiral, this race to the bottom, which they try and learn from each other. And that's not just in some of the ways we've heard already. The antisocial ways, the antisocial program at the heart of these governments, forcing millions of people into poverty when there's never been any need for them to be in poverty before. We've just heard from the Conservative government in Britain boasting at their national conference in this past week that they will freeze all benefits for people of a working age for the next 2 years, tightening the screw on those who need that help most. Why? Just so they can give yet another tax break for the 1%. Absolutely unthinkable. Shame indeed. Unthinkable that they can put that out on the eve of an election and think that it's going to win them votes. And we were together at the 2010 G20 when we took to the streets of Toronto to challenge the G20. They had only just used billions and billions and billions of our money to bail out the banks for the financial crisis that they've caused. But within 6 months, the Harper government, the Conservative government from the UK was saying, that's enough of the public bailout. We've managed to restart the system in favor of capital, in favor of the banks, and now comes the pain. And guess who's going to be paying for it? It's not going to be the banks who caused the crisis. It's going to be everybody else who had no part in it at all. And they managed to give that message so strongly that within 6 months of us all knowing why the crisis had come about, as a crisis of capitalism, we were being told it was a crisis of overspending. And somehow the public sector workers were responsible for it. And that's when you started seeing, yes, another 20,000, another 50,000, hundreds of thousands of public sector workers being laid off in Britain alone simply because they'd managed to shift the message and turned it into an austerity program which was going to become permanent. And that's what we're now seeing. This wasn't a quick fix. We've heard Naomi Klein mentioned. She's She's one of your compatriots. I'm also proud to say she's one of our patrons at War on Want. And in her previous book, The Shock Doctrine, it was exactly this. You wait for these moments of crisis and you turn them to the advantage of the long-term program that capital has had in place since the 1970s to reduce government, to put the pressure down on working people. And that, again, the programs that we're seeing, they're not just antisocial, they're anti-labor. Just as Harper on this side of the Atlantic boasts about having the tightest anti-union laws, so our government in the UK are boasting that they've got the tightest anti-union laws in Europe. And what's the consequence of that? There are over 5 million working people in Britain who are not able to earn enough to put food on the tables of their families and keep a roof over their heads. 5 million people who are not paid a living wage. And that's a scandal in a country where you've seen the chief executives get a 14% pay rise just in the last year alone. And it's exactly that type of absurd social re-engineering that we're trying to fight against. The environmental side, which John just talked about and Ben showed so eloquently, I thought, before, the slides that you showed of the tar sands here, they are completely unimaginable to us. We live on a tiny island. The land mass of Britain is, I think, about a quarter of the land mass of Ontario province. And our population is 65 million, so almost double the population of the whole of Canada. Actually, I think it felt a little bit like when we were on Vancouver Island. That was about the same size as Britain, and with all of the 60 million people crammed into that. So for us, this new drive for fracking, which I know we share, is rather different. Because we haven't got these vast expanses where people can go and start, digging and prospecting and ripping apart the environment. So what have they done? They've just passed a new legislation, they're saying they're going to pass new legislation, which makes it permissible for the energy companies to drill for shale gas, to do the fracking under the homes of British citizens without their consent. I mean, you couldn't make it up. You couldn't make it up. Anyway, they put it out to public consultation. They put it out to public consultation. What do you think about this? You don't have to be a Nobel Prize winner in probability theory to know what people said. 99% of people came straight back and said, no, this sounds grim. And then it turned out, it hasn't finished, I'm afraid. It turned out that it wasn't actually a consultation, it was a test. Because even though 99% of people came back under no circumstances, the government said that was actually the wrong answer. The right answer was yes. And we're going to start with this process coming through as of now. And that's the sort of thing that we're a complete disregard for any sense of a post-carbon future, a disregard for any of the democracy or any of the other things we hold dear. So anti-social, anti-labor, anti-environment, and then the other thing which unites, I'm afraid, our governments is this profound imperialist agenda. And it's been mentioned a little bit already, but this profound imperialist agenda which brought Stephen Harper over just last month to the NATO summit in South Wales. I was there as part of the counter-summit saying we do not want any more NATO, we do not want this constant race for war, this constant rearmament. We want peace in the world and not this warmongering. And it was extraordinary, it was just extraordinary to hear the warmongering, the beating of the war drums in relation to Russia and Ukraine. I mean, what do we want? Another Cold War? Was the last one so great? This sense in which we're trying once again to take up the cudgels of war in the Middle East. And I know you on Monday have the federal vote in this country in terms of going to war with the IS, the Islamic State, which we had in Britain, and it went through Parliament very, very swiftly just a couple of weeks ago. And I'm not standing here with any brief to defend the horrors that are going on in Iraq and Syria. But surely we've learned that it's precisely as a result of NATO's operations around the world that we get these blowback time and again. In 2005, 9 years ago, the CIA had already brought out a document saying, we will get the same blowback from Iraq that we saw from arming the Mujahideen against the Soviets in Afghanistan. And sure enough, we are now reaping the whirlwind for that. And I know one of the things which is more difficult in Canada than it is with us is the whole situation around Israel and Palestine as well, which for us in Britain is such a key issue in this entire imperialist adventure. We had 150,000 people out on the streets of London to protest against the latest Israeli attack on Gaza. And the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement trying to bring Israel back in line with international law is growing so strongly in Europe. And we would love it if in the spirit of forging solidarity, we could also call out to the Canadian movements to be parts of that. And if anybody wants to say more about that, I'm here for the next 2 days and we can talk about it. But it is about building resistance. And we've built, as War on Want with a lot of other groups on the left, have built the People's Assembly Against Austerity, which is a national movement from all different groups, all taking part in a very horizontal structure, and with the trade unions, with the environmental groups, all at local chapter level. We had the first meeting of that last summer. 4,500 people turned up, which was amazing for just a meeting you held. Over 100 local chapters have now been formed, and that's going on, and it's becoming a real force. And we've got on the 18th of this month a massive demonstration planned in London between the People's Assembly, but led by the trade unions, led by the TUCR Trade Union Congress, saying Britain needs a pay rise. We will not put up with the low cost, low wage, low rights Labour policy of this government. But what's so funny for me is that the minute you start getting this type of resistance, what does the government do? They introduce another law, and the law is a gagging law. This thing which they've introduced called the Lobbying Act, which makes it almost impossible for any of us to run campaigns in the year leading up to a general election, i.e. now. You know, so they've said you've all got to register, the penalties under which you'll have to do this are so severe you'll actually find yourself unable to do anything at all. Well, you'll be glad to know that War on Want, along with many, many other groups, are refusing to register, and if they want to come and get us, they'll have to find us. The other fight which we have in common between the European Union as a whole and Canada, Maude already talked about and others have mentioned, is CETA, the EU-Canada trade deal, the comprehensive economic and trade agreement that we were told was concluded last week. Don't believe it. It hasn't finished. And I do feel rather guilty about this because a few years ago, people from the council and people from other members of the trade justice movement here in Canada came to us and said, this is the next big thing, join us in our fight. And we were recovering from the onslaught of austerity, and people were focused so much on trying to fight back in the national space that it wasn't easy to try to build a movement. And again, yes, you do have to thank the US government a little bit for this, for coming along with CETA Mark II, NAFTA on steroids, as they're calling it. Basically the most extraordinary threat we've ever seen in Europe, and that has drawn in the movement to fight against CETA on its tailcoats. Because we see these massive agreements as the biggest transfer of power, again power, from society to transnational capital that we have seen in a generation. And we fought off their efforts to do that last time around. Many of us were part of that same movement back in the 1990s, which fought off the Multilateral Agreement on Investment, the MAI. They tried to put exactly the same things through there. A concerted international global movement fought back against that, and we won. And in 1998, it fell off the table and it's never come back. They tried to insert the same powers through the WTO just 2 years later. And again, we rose up. We had so many battles within the WTO and outside on the streets, and we brought it down. So that by 2004, those new issues of investment, government procurement, competition policy, all the things that you'll find in CETA were wiped off the table. And again, you know, this was a massive victory. They've come back on the bilateral route now and tried to slip it through in CETA, in TTIP, the EU-US one. And let's be absolutely clear, this is NAFTA plus. It is WTO plus. If you thought you'd had a hard time under NAFTA, wait for this one. And we've had studies which have been done for the British government by the London School of Economics. And they've said we've looked at the sort of pain that Canada has faced as a result of the investor-state challenges under NAFTA Chapter 11. We in Europe can expect far more expensive, and on a far greater range of issues than they've ever even seen in Canada. Health, or the stuff we've already seen. You've heard about the nuclear challenge in Germany. Germany decided that they were going to phase out nuclear power from the year 2022. And they're now being sued by a Swedish company, Vattenfall, for 3.7 billion euros as a result of having taken that national decision. That was in the wake of the Fukushima nuclear disaster, the implosion of that nuclear power plant in the second ever nuclear disaster to reach that top level 7 disaster, same as Chernobyl was. And the German people came out on the streets, they said, we do not want nuclear power. And the German government said, we hear you. We are going to phase out nuclear power. Now they're being sued by a Swedish company which feels that they're not going to be able to profit enough in the future from that. And that's exactly what we're going to get through CETA. It's exactly what we're going to get through the parallel EU-US trade treaty as well. Private corporations being able to sue the governments in secret courts, which aren't even really courts. There's no judges in them. It's just 3 corporate lawyers who are allowed to pronounce on what they think the damages should be for these corporations. You can't really, when we put this out to people in the public meetings that we do, they're absolutely shocked. The government procurement rules, which again Maude was talking about earlier, this means that you will no longer be able to put any requirements on companies coming in and doing deals with the government locally or at the municipal level or indeed at the provincial level. And that's not just about the discrimination they talk about. It's not because you're treating European companies in a different way to Canadian companies. It's saying you can't put any conditions on these companies at all. They get the power, they get the free rein to invest and to operate exactly as they will. And again, it means that we lose any control over that foreign investment. We lose any ability to make it work for people, for local communities, for our own historical development. Public services, absolutely under attack. I was really happy to get the Save Canada Post badge when we were outside just earlier. And again, it's fascinating this. That the Canada Post is still in public hands, but it's decided it's not going to be doing any of the posting anymore. Well, for us, it's the other way around. We've still got it, delivering letters. It's just it's being privatized more and more. And that's the next wave. That basically it's either given out to the private sector or else the public sector is not going to be allowed to deliver it anymore. And similarly, these other new powers being given over to big corporations through this regulatory cooperation forum. I'm sure we'll talk more about that in the workshops in the next couple of days, but it basically means that these big corporations get to sit on new intergovernmental bodies vetting any rules and regulations and standards that you might want to introduce in the future, because they will have first call as to whether or not those are the sorts of regulations that our countries should be putting through. Democracy? Democracy completely goes. It is fascism. It completely goes. But I just wanted to make my final comments in relation to how we fight back. And I think partly we need to move beyond just resistance. Again and again, we find ourselves running to catch up. We're fighting fires wherever they break out. When we've defeated one of these, it comes up again. When we've defeated that, it comes up again in another form. And I think this, for me, Paul mentioned the experience of the Bolivian resistance in Cochabamba when they fought off Bechtel, which Oscar Oliveira was involved in, and also other leaders like Pablo Solon, who I've discussed this with. And one of the things that they learned was that you have those victories, but you need then to build on those victories and not just go back to sleep and keep fighting them again and again. And what they did in Bolivia was they took the social movements from the fight which they won for water, against water privatization, and they then took it onto the gas war, fighting the gas companies which had come from outside Bolivia and trying to extract their natural gas without giving anything back to the people of Bolivia. They then went on from there to turn the social movements into political movements for change. And that political movement elected the first ever indigenous person to the presidency of Bolivia. Evo Morales, the first person in their history ever to come from an indigenous background and to become the president. And what they said to us is, you need to be formulating your program with a positive alternative out in front of it, which can then lead people on so that they see that there's something to keep going in the fight. And you turn the movement anger into political programs, you turn it into political pressure based on principles that everybody can come behind. And that, I mean, the book which Maude so kindly referred to at the beginning, which I wrote last year, was trying to draw out from all of these experiences around the world, what are the common principles that can unite us? They're not a blueprint. I'm not the World Bank or the IMF giving people blueprints, but they're things when you start reading all of the different programs that people are coming up with across the world, you begin to see them crystallize behind certain principles. And there are three basic principles which constantly come to the fore in this. The first is popular sovereignty. The idea that we, the people, need to reclaim power. And that's also something which was well known in the days when we were fighting the battles of globalization, that big capital, transnational capital, had taken all the power. People thought that they'd taken it away from governments. Actually, governments had handed it to them on a plate and continued to hand it to them on a plate whenever they said they hadn't got enough. So the idea is not going back to national sovereignty, but to popular sovereignty. So we, the people at local levels, get that power back. And it's amazing for us. I told you about the experience we had with the UK government allowing fracking under your own house without you knowing. Well, we look across to the moratoria here in Quebec, also the amazing result in New Brunswick just 10 days ago. And that's the sort of thing which we should be seeing as positive models for the future, where people, communities get back power over their futures. So popular sovereignty is the first one which comes up again and again. The second is around ownership, because you can't make those decisions if you don't own the things that you're talking about. And that can be public ownership by the state, if it's properly, made responsive and accountable to the people. It could be collective ownership. It could be the ownership of the First Nations. It could be the ownerships of cooperatives. Common ownership, as we see it, where it comes back to the people and people get to decide. And that can also relate to a whole lot of other things. Water, the right to water. It's about a common good. It is not about an economic good which people can trade away for profit. It's about a common good which we all have as a human right. And again, the British government, to its incredible shame, together with the Canadian government and the other Anglo-Saxon governments, held out for as long as they could at the United Nations, trying to say water cannot be a human right. And they were overthrown, thankfully, by all the other countries in the world which said, no, that's rubbish. And we want to fight for those common goods. In the banks, we bailed out the banks. We bought the banks. We paid all the money. And yet we left them in private hands. It's like going into a shop and buying a washing machine. And they say, shall we deliver it? And you say, no, just keep it. We took all the pain. And we never got any of the gain, turning banks back into public services, public utilities, which are there to be able to lend and to stimulate investment in the parts of our society which need investment. That type of common ownership gives you the power to direct it. And the third pillar, alongside popular sovereignty and common ownership, is social production. Because when you know that you own the things and you can direct them in the directions that you believe are just and will lead to a social and environmentally progressive future, then you can start dictating what you produce and why. It's not just about producing things for profit. It's not just about having markets which serve the interests of the 1% and condemn the 99% to poverty. It's about saying we can create and fathom and fashion a better world. we can use the resources that we have to create socially just and environmentally sustainable futures for the next 7 generations. And you can do that when you have common ownership and when you have popular sovereignty coming together and dictating how we want to spend our money in the future. And it comes down to everything. It's about, gender equity. Why is it that the burdens of the wage economy fall so much heavier on women? It's also about the arms economy. Why are we spending $1.7 trillion a year as a global species on more and more armaments? It's taking those choices back into our hands and redirecting them for a social future. And those 3 principles seem to come up from so many of the different areas where I was reading. I wanted to put them into the book and give that sense of there being a hope. Because all over the world, even in the midst of the crisis that we're fighting, and even with all of the resistance battles that we're fighting, those positive alternatives are coming into view. People are making them happen in their own spaces. They're challenging the powers of capital which deny them those spaces. And we're seeing the local actions leading to amazing victories. And that, for me, is the hope of forging solidarity internationally. That we have the local actions, the national movements, but the global movement of movements which unites us all and helps us to learn from each other. That's why, as I said at the beginning, I'm so thrilled to be here, because I get the opportunity to be able to learn from all of you and then to take that back to Britain and share it. But if there are any other things that we can do together for the future, let's try and make them happen. Together we can build a better world. It's a lot of struggle, but we have to do it, because if we don't, then the future is lost. Thank you.
Wow. John, thank you so much for coming a long way to share those fabulous words with us that are deeply, deeply moving. We share a good friend in Pablo Solon. Pablo Solon was the ambassador from Bolivia to the United Nations that did put forward the resolution to the General Assembly on the human right to water. And I'll never forget when he did it. I was there in the auditorium in the General Assembly with some of the gang here, and watching him. He gave his magnificent speech, but then he came up to join us in the balcony. And when they vote at the United Nations, they vote at their seat, and it comes up on a big electronic board. And we honestly thought we were going to lose. Canada led the fight against, and Great Britain was against, and the United States was against, Australia was against, and so on. But we didn't. 122 votes in favor. Not one of the countries voted against. Even Canada abstained. 41 abstained. But what was really interesting afterwards was that one after another, including Canada, including the United States, including Great Britain, the ambassadors got up and they started to lecture Pablo. And he was up in the balcony, so they'd turn and they'd go like this, with their little fingers wagging at him, that they'd really pushed it. And why did he push this so fast when we needed more time? This is after Pablo had just given the statistics from a new study from the WHO, the World Health Organization, that in the global south, every 3.5 seconds a child dies of waterborne disease. And he actually held up his fingers like this when he did it, 3.5, and you could have heard a pin drop in that room. I mean, if anything swayed whoever was unsure at that point, that did it. So they had the nerve to stand up and say we needed more research, right? And I will never forget standing beside Pablo as he looked down from the balcony with his arms crossed and a great big shit-eating grin on his face, as if to say, what part of I just won and you didn't do you not get? A sweet, sweet moment in my memory, I can tell you. I want to thank all of our wonderful panelists, and I want to thank all of you. And before you go, we have wonderful Karen Jordan, who has some words from our development department, has some words for you. Tomorrow is going to be a wonderful day for any of those who are here tonight would like to do more of this. You can register at the conference tomorrow morning. You have to join the council, but we'd love to have you. And I'm going to invite Karen up now just to say a few words, and then we're going to send you safely off into the evening.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so privileged to have these last few minutes to speak to you. And after the energy and the commitment that's been demonstrated here this evening, what excites me the most is the fact that there are so many of us here together and that we are here and hearing our values being reflected. And how often do we have the opportunity to do that? And we need to have more people engaged because we really need to build our movement and to bring a critical mass of Canadians to the forefront and to stand up and take back our democracy. Whoever thought we would be struggling for democracy in Canada like we are now, where we have, our governments have virtually abdicated their responsibilities to people and communities and have such a corporate agenda. And we have so much at stake, and it's really hard to slow people down long enough these days to capture their attention, to tell them that the country they think they have is rapidly disappearing and on the verge of being gone completely. So it's important work like that's happened here tonight, that we are able to bring speakers in that have researched, have been advocating for so long tirelessly, to bring public awareness, to energize and empower communities. And that's so great to see you all here tonight. And this work does come about because we have supporters who actually fund our activities. It's people like the people in this room tonight that make this work possible. And it's just such a privilege to be able to talk to our supporters every day. That's what I do. And there are people right across the country who are passionate and concerned